Post-election analysis and, of course, our coverage of the run-up to the October 17th presidential election rerun that has continued to elicit a lot of reactions from both sides of the political divide. The latest, of course, being that letter from the Jubilee party to the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission saying they are rejecting that project team named yesterday by the chair, Wafula Chebukati, to manage the presidential election rerun. And we have seen a response by IEBC very swiftly. IEBC saying that they are an independent commission and they are not susceptible to direction by any person. And I'm now joined by two members of the Kenyan Senate. That is the Homa Bay Senator Moses Kajwang and the Murang'a Senator Irungu Kang'ata, who is also the Deputy Majority Whip in the Senate. Thank you, Waheshimiwa, for joining me on the program tonight. So we have seen NASA reject the election date, saying that that is null and void. And now we're seeing your party, Jubilee, saying that they do not agree with that team that was named by Wafula Chebukati. Senator Kang'ata, what gives here from the political class? It seems like you are confusing Kenyans.
No, well, it is a fact. We noted that Mr. Chebukati acted on instructions from NASA when he sidelined some officials who have been designated to do some roles. And then he came up with his own parallel team. And that team is the one which we feel quite uncomfortable with that team. It is not a fair team. It is quite a partisan team. So therefore, as a party, we are entitled to raise issues. And that is exactly what we did as a political party.
NASA did say that they want a kind of overhaul of that IEBC. Is Jubilee just simply reacting to what NASA have been doing, saying?
No, the demands of NASA are legally untenable for several reasons. Number one, they demanded that they want the commissioners to go home. According to the Constitution, that is quite untenable for several reasons. One, the Supreme Court decision was quite clear. It said that the commission must undertake a fresh election according to a certain judgment that was made by the High Court defining what is a commission. It's very clear that a commission is the commissioners. So therefore, there is no way, unless you want to violate that court order, that we can compel those commissioners to get out of the office.
All
Number
right.
two, and quite importantly, presently, upon that judgment of the Supreme Court, the president cannot do some things. One includes he cannot appoint public officers. So therefore, when you push these people out, there will be no president who will have legal powers to appoint new commissioners. So therefore, ours was a legal objection.
All right.
And for what we are talking about, we want this election to be conducted, and those demands which came from NASA are legally untenable.
Senator Kajwang, NASA has a lot of demands, wants almost an overhaul of the Electoral Commission, including some members of that IEBC to go to jail. Do you think your demands are legally untenable?
Very tenable. First of all, when I saw that letter on a Jubilee letterhead signed by Raphael Tuju, I was praying that it turns out to be a joke, because it was a joke. You cannot go into an independent commission and start saying that so-and-so is partisan, so they should be set aside. When NASA put its case forward, we said the Supreme Court was very clear that IEBC conducted irregularities and illegalities. Now, someone who conducts an illegality cannot be allowed anywhere near an electoral process. Someone who conducts an irregularity cannot be allowed anywhere near there. In our submission to the Supreme Court, we felt that certain officials, by acts of omission or commission, could have resulted in the botching of the elections.
All right.
Now, even though we have not seen the detailed judgment by the Supreme Court,
Yes.
you are seeing a situation where IEBC itself has decided to set aside some officials. Why is IEBC setting aside those officials? Probably in their own wisdom and judgment, when they did their own internal audit, they found that those are the officials who could have committed the irregularities and illegalities. So we are not asking for people to be set aside because they are partisan. In Kenya, you know, since we have only two major coalitions, you either support one or the other. So you will never get to a situation, even if you went to the cardinal of the church or,
right.
or to the heads of our churches, they've got a partisan position. But we are simply saying that the people who committed irregularities and illegalities must be set aside. And then, what if the Supreme Court, in their detailed judgment, tell us that a commissioner committed illegalities? Do you go into elections with that commissioner who committed illegalities? The answer is no. So we are not calling for an entire overhaul of the commission or the disbandment of IBC, but specifically dealing with the people who cost Kenyans 40 billion shillings.
I want Senator Kangata to tell us why he thinks those demands are untenable, but what is your take on that team that was put together by Wafula Chebukati yesterday, the one that Jubilee is saying it's opposed to?
Well, at least IEBC is starting to listen to the views of stakeholders. But what I would have expected, or what I would have preferred, is that IEBC should not be picking the views of stakeholders from the media. There needs to be a consultative forum or a consultative approach through which IEBC gets the views of the different stakeholders. As it is now, you might find that NASA says certain things through the media. Of course, you have sent some letters to IEBC. Jubilee also sends letters to IEBC. We've been calling for a forum. We've been calling for a forum that brings together all stakeholders. What the commission chairman has done to institute a new project team, I think, is one step forward, but it does not cover all the steps that are required to guarantee a free and fair election.
That forum, what would it do to the independence of the commission?
Absolutely, it will definitely add value to the commission. Right now, even the law that establishes the IBC expects that the IBC shall consult other players. The body through which IBC has been consulting has been the PPLC, the Political Party Liaison Committee. PPLC has had leadership wrangles, and it has not been a very effective body. Right. That is why when we went to Windsor, there was a feeling that there needs to be a broader representation. And we are looking at the Ghana experience. One of the reasons why Ghana was very successful in the election, where an incumbent president was voted out, was a manner in which the Electoral Commission conducted itself. And one of the greatest things that that commission did was participation and involvement of political players. I think that's a lesson that is still very recent in our minds that we can pick from.
All right. Bwana Kangata, do you think 40 days today to that October 17th is enough to institute the changes that NASA are saying? And what is your take on his hitting out at what you are trying to do to that project team? Let's call that a joke.
Well, this country is not being run by an entity called NASA. Raila is not the president of this country. He does not have any legitimacy at all. He does not have any legal power to direct an independent commission to do as he wishes. In any event, we have a situation where, as Kenyans and also as a political party called Jubilee, we have been giving in to various demands by Raila Odinga. He came up with a demand that he wants certain commissioners to vacate from IBC. He led demonstrations, and by sheer bad luck, our government acceded to those demands. And by the way, I think that was the major error that we did, because he seems to be getting all he wants. All right. He wanted our win to be nullified, it was nullified. He wanted those commissions to be kicked out, they have been kicked out. From where I sit, I want to thank the Kenyan people that when we got to the ballot, they refused to hear his demands. So therefore, my point is, those demands which are being made by Raila Odinga and his coalition, they are legally untenable. And number two, they are geared towards ensuring we don't have an election, because they cannot be obtained within the few days which are remaining. We need IBC to procure new ballots. We need IBC to prepare itself. But now we are having a situation where the people who are being appointed to do the so-called special project are people who come from regions where, according to the submissions which are being made by the lawyer of NASA, those are the regions which are problematic. A good example is Mombasa. Mombasa was cited severally by the lawyers who are representing NASA in court as being a place where forms were not being signed. Right. Then we see a situation where the returning officer who was in charge of that place called Mombasa is the one who is being appointed to be part of that project in Nairobi.
So you're saying
surely
IBC is playing to the public gallery?
No. IBC is playing to the gallery of NASA. not the public. By the way, public does not, when you talk of public, at times people create a notion as if what Riley says is what coincides with the public interest. No way. IBC presently seems to be dancing to the tune of Raila Odinga,
Senator Kajwang, do you
appointing
agree?
people. Yeah, listen.
I don't agree, of course. And I think Irungu and Jubilee are doing IBC a great disfavor as far as perception is concerned. Because every time someone says something about IBC, which is a state body that is financed by our taxes, and a state body that is bound by the Constitution that talks about public participation, every time you say something about IBC, the first people to jump is Jubilee. You heard the other day my colleague Murkomen saying that if NASA insists on dismantling IBC, we shall dismantle Supreme Court. That is the wrong way to go. And that is a kind of discredit we are doing to institutions that will end up in a situation where results or the next election will not be accepted across the board. If the returning officer for Mombasa committed an irregularity and illegality, he has no business being part of that project team. But you cannot tell me that Tuju can sit somewhere and decide that some 10 people are partisan on the basis of their last names, and then order IBC to exclude them from the project team. There must be a different basis. It should not be on the basis of last name. It should not be on the basis of the regions where they come from. It should be on the basis that these are people who have been given an opportunity and they've squandered it. The same way we are saying Chiloba and the 4 or 5 other people you have cited specifically squandered that opportunity in the first round.
You see, the problem from where I sit has been brought about by the jurisprudence that has been set out by the Supreme Court.
Right.
Because the jurisprudence which has been set out by the Supreme Court in that decision seems to suggest that whenever there is any breach of law which is attributable to the IBC,
yes,
you will have a nullification of an election. That is unfair in this sense. It does not take into account the interest of the so-called innocent party who has participated in that election. In this instance, the innocent party is Kenyatta. There is no wrong. There's no wrong that has been attributed to Uhuru Kenyatta. So therefore, the question is, when you cancel that election, you fail to take into account the rights of the second respondent, who is Mr. Kenyatta.
All right.
So, and therefore, you may have a situation where we can go into a repeat election, then a cheeky official in IBC decides to break the law. And then upon breaking that law, you then again go back to the court and say, no, look here, IBC has breached the law.
Go back to the court.
And again, you see, we as a party, we don't have full control of IBC. If on their own motion they decide to break the law, surely it is us who are going to be prejudiced.
All right.
And no one
Fair
is going
point.
to compensate.
Allow me to ask you this question that has been asked a lot, especially Kenyans talking about it on social media. Why does it seem like Jubilee, whenever you are speaking, it's like you're speaking on behalf of IBC, defending IBC and all that?
No, we are not defending IBC. In fact, as we speak, we have issues with IBC. We have said that we have an issue with the so-called new team that has been constituted. We think that new team is partisan, and therefore we think that IBC, the way it is preparing for the so-called fresh election, is quite in favor of our competitors. So at this moment, we are not defending IBC.
Right.
In fact, we have an issue with IBC.
But
however,
yes,
the reason why at some times we tended to defend IBC, it was out of a realization that our opponent seems not to be ready for any election. If you noted, by the way, our opponents never invested in campaign. How many campaigns, rallies did Raila Odinga conduct? How many stops did Raila Odinga conduct? There were so few. His mind was fixated with attacking IBC, going to court. He was not interested in campaign. But look at us. We are always ready to go and fight it out.
What do you say to this and to the fact that Jubilee is accusing you of buying time and having demands which are legally untenable because you are, pushing for a coalition government?
First of all, what my brother says is very relative. Someone sitting in Siaya County will say Uhuru Kenyatta never campaigned because he never set foot in Siaya. Someone sitting in Homa Bay County, where I come from, Uhuru Kenyatta came to Homa Bay only once during the campaign period. In fact, in his presidency, he has come to Homa Bay only once when he came to open the causeway in Bita, and he stayed there for about 1 hour. So Irungu might feel that we didn't campaign simply because we did not spend a week in his county.
Sorry.
Can
I
think that conception that we did not campaign is misleading.
Can I comment?
We campaigned very vigorously to get
just
where we
10 seconds.
Well, the point is, this is an objective issue. You must attend what we call a campaign schedule, which details out how many stops, how many rallies you are going to conduct. Compare how many meetings these people set out to campaign or to address with those that were given by our party. You'll see they set out going to about, let's say, 30% of the regions that we covered. So we were working at that, we were working almost thrice the effort.
No,
and therefore, when we win, surely...
I disagree. We campaigned very vigorously. We campaigned throughout the country. And I am very confident that on 8th of August, we won. And I'm confident that when we go ahead, we shall win. I think the most important thing that we need to treat is this perception that we are not ready for elections. If we were not ready for elections, we would not have gone to the Supreme Court, because it is a Supreme Court that could have triggered a fresh election. We would have decided to go to the street and exercise our right as enshrined in the Constitution. But after a lot of soul searching, we decided to go to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, the wording of the Constitution is very clear, that its decision shall be final. And when you guys were urging us to go to court, you knew that in the Constitution it says the wording shall be final. So when you say that the little man or the innocent party, in this case, Uhuru Kenyatta, his rights are being trampled upon, you are the ones who encouraged us to go to court. And the decision of the Supreme Court is final. Now, the same Constitution allows fresh elections. And that the wording is fresh elections. Because the elections envisaged under the Constitution, following a petition in the Supreme Court, is different from the elections envisaged where the candidates fail to get the first round.
Yes.
So this is a fresh election. There's a reason why you're given 60 days to organize the fresh election. Because the assumption is that you're starting from scratch. IBC came up with some interpretation yesterday. Now, we've set out very detailed feedback or responses to the actions of IBC. Number one, we are saying that we need to get rid of the people who committed illegalities and irregularities. Number two, we are saying that technology that was used that seemingly failed, because the Chief Justice talked about transmission.
Yes.
Technology that failed needs to be audited and corrected.
Let's talk about
processes need to be taken care of. And that is why we're saying, if you're going into elections on 17th of October, will we have enough time to deal with these issues? Between 17th and October and 1st of November, you still have time. Why do we want to stampede? Why do we want to stampede the nation into a situation where, when we beat Irungu's team, they are going to run back to the Supreme Court?
All right, let's talk about something else very quickly as we wind up. Today, we have seen election petitions flooding the High Court, including, I think, more than 100 petitions, according to the judiciary, more than 10 of them gubernatorial. Some people seem to think the many petitions, they support NASA's claim that the election was stolen.
Yeah, but they're not true. When you compare how many petitions have been filed this year, you compare that with those petitions that were filed in 2013, you will see there has been a decrease. In fact, the increase in petition filing has only occurred from Monday after that misconception and a very poor jurisprudence has been established by the Supreme Court. So strictly speaking, IBC has done a better job this year compared to 2013. If at all, you were to measure in terms of how many petitions have been filed this year, there are quite fewer. And that's, by the way, vindicates our win. It shows most of our governors, most of our senators, members of parliament, and members of the county assembly who have been elected in this election. It is a reflection of the people's will. It is inconceivable where you can have people voting for Jubilee members of parliament and senators and governors, and they are not voting for the president. That is inconceivable. Finally, maybe to counter some of the point that has been said here by my colleague here, the idea which was propagated by Raila, that he does not care for our children. He doesn't care for the millions millions of our high school graduates, our high school candidates, our primary school candidates for Standard 8 who are set to do examination in November. It shows how heartless he is as a political leader. We must always love children. We must always know that life does not start and end with politics. And our children are the people who should be learning good example from us leaders. But this idea where you say you don't care, you would even somehow wish they fail in the examination is very unfair.
Senator Kajwang, the NASA leader did say that if the elections are moved by, not elections, exams by 2 weeks, the children will not die. That is what the senator
It's very bad.
Well,
it's very bad. Coming from a leader, I was shocked.
I
was shocked.
We cannot use children as political shields in a combat. And I'm saying that's what Jubilee is trying to do. The dates that are in the Constitution are election dates, and timelines are in the Constitution. Examination dates are not in the Constitution. We are a republic. We are a constitutional democracy. So there are certain things you cannot change, and there are certain things you can change. But I think there's a point my colleague brought up, which is interesting, and I agree with. And we need to treat it in this way. The question is, what will stop a cheeky IBC official from doing something funny, which then will end up in court and result in nullification of the next round of elections? There is an offense called treason. And treason is where someone tries to establish a government in ways other than those that are stipulated in the Constitution. If there are people who try to establish a government, people who try to make Uhuru Kenyatta president contrary to the wills of Kenyans, that is treason. We need to raise the bar on some of these offenses. Let us not treat them as petty, so that we give an example, we met out an example to those who are involved. They'll be terrified to do anything about it next time.
Final question, gentlemen. From a Jubilee perspective, what next? And is Jubilee and NASA, the political class, really, do they really want this October 17th election to happen? That is a question Kenyans are asking.
Yes, indeed. We have clearly stated that we don't mind any date. We do not even compel IBC to set out that date. And by the way, compare how many meetings that we have addressed immediately after the ruling by the Supreme Court. Our president went to Bama Market. Thereafter, our deputy president went to Thika. We have gone to Kajiado. We have gone to so many places. These guys, they are still ventilating and celebrating. They have only gone to Kisii yesterday, I think so. So that tells you how politically lazy these guys are.
All right.
And after we defeat them,
30 seconds only, where do you think this election, where do you think you will win this election?
Simple. We work hard. I'm telling you, compare the effort that we put into politics, the effort that we put towards mobilizing people, going to see people. It does not measure up at all with the effort they do. There is no way, by the way, Jesus said very well, you will only reap what you sow. They don't sweat. We sweat for our political capital. They sit pretty in Nairobi, going to court, trying to stall the process because they know very well they can't win.
But, you know, if the president's utterances and activities in the first 3 days following the ruling were to be considered, I mean, that was the most embarrassing situation for me as a Kenyan. Looking at the president intimidating the judiciary, looking at the president in Burma and conducting himself in a way that probably did not lend value and honor to the office that he holds. I think, Irungu, leave us alone with our strategies. We've got good strategies. We know we are going to win. But the way forward for Kenya, today there was supposed to be a discussion between the different political players and IBC, so that we can deal with those issues that have been highlighted. If these issues can be dealt with properly, then we have no problems with 17th of October. Otherwise, we cannot go into an election superintended over by people who committed illegalities and irregularities. You cannot go into an election presided over by thugs.
Thank you, Senators. Thank you, gentlemen. I wish we had more time. Senator Moses Kajwang, Senator County of Homa Bay, and the Senator in the County of Murang'a, who is also, that is Irungu Kang'ata, who is also the Deputy Majority Whip in the Kenyan.
Is actually the whip designate.
Deputy.
It's deputy.
Deputy.
Yes, in the Senate. Thank you so much for coming to share your perspectives on this. It is a story we'll continue to keep an eye on as we report, or as we cover for you Kenyans, the run-up to the October 17th presidential election rerun. Kenyans still waiting for that full judgment by the Supreme Court of Kenya. The IEBC facing a lot of pressure from both sides of the political divide. They are set to hold meetings with leadership from both NASA and Jubilee tomorrow. That's why we leave it on Kivumbi 2017. Be sure to join us every night from Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. as we discuss these governance and political issues for you. I'm Ben Kitili. Don't go too far. Linda Ogutu is coming up shortly at the top of the hour with KTN Prime.